Well, we've touched on the subject of applied psychology. Of course, government applied psychology was used to ramp up fear during the whole of the COVID-19 debacle, and since then it's come to light that psychology is being used everywhere on the population of UK. Let's just jump back and have a little look at what's been happening in Ukraine. And Ukraine on the map here, but what do we want to do? We want to bring in our old friend BBC Media Action. Now, it has only been the UK column that has alerted viewers and listeners to the fact that BBC Media Action worked inside Ukraine to transform and to enhance Ukraine media around a company called Suspilny. And if you have a look at their website now, you'll see that they've now gone to reports on the hour. So this is very BBC. If you're in Ukraine, you're going to have BBC news drilled into your head via Suspilny every hour. But what else have they been doing? Well, they've been doing some very interesting studies. Lifeline Media, and this one here, Transforming Gender Perceptions, if we bring those labels in. They were after a consultant for Lifeline Media, and then they were working to transform gender perceptions in Ukraine. So we've got a country at war, being utterly destroyed, the people suffering. What is BBC Media Action doing as a charity? It isn't calming the war down or stopping it. No, it is going to teach Ukrainians how to identify the correct gender. I took this little clip from this lady, Nicola Bailey, from Media Action's Insight blog. Not saying she's doing anything wrong, but we're looking at what her organisation is doing. And look at the title, Supporting Media and Humanitarian Practitioners to Overcome Communication Challenges. And what have we got? We've got humanitarian situation monitoring going on in May 2022, a focus on preferred communication channels and information needs. Well, who was preferring the channels? I would suggest that's the BBC and hence the British government. And what were their information needs? Now, where this led us to, and there's a lot more work needed, but a whole group of NGOs in reality that are hoovering up data from Ukraine. Who's funding all this? Well, of course, it's the British government, and I wonder whether some of this might be on your database, Mike. We'll have to do some work on this. But remember also that BBC Media Action, working with this organisation, National Democratic Institute, this is also buried inside Ukraine, in supporters, government, multilateral institutions, corporations, that might be Coca-Cola, and individuals, many of whom are working or have worked within the US government, and many of them are extremely wealthy commercial people. So BBC Media Action has helped unleash all of this, a combination of media and psychology inside Ukraine. And I've just added a further organisation there, Strengthening Democracy Through Partnership. If you have a look at this organisation, you immediately question what it's really trying to do. So if we sum it up, what we can see is that BBC Media Action are essentially benefited from paid research in war zones. So it doesn't matter the suffering of the people. This is about media and psychology. There's some text which you can freeze on screen talking about the fourth commitment which humanitarian agencies sign up to under the core humanitarian standard, stating that communities and people affected by a crisis know their rights and entitlements. And so we're to believe and be happy with the fact that it's going to be media action that is going to help teach people their rights. I think something rather different is coming along. This, we're going to leave viewers to investigate themselves, but this is part of an organisation called REACH, which is one of a nest of organisations hoovering up data on every part of people's lives in Ukraine. And if we go on to this one, impact, which we mentioned on the initial starting screen, on this particular page of their website, you can scroll down and the data goes on forever. It is clear that essentially Ukrainians, for all their suffering, are simply being used as the lab rats while this data is hoovered up. But here's the detail of BBC Media Action. So this is a request for proposals. Media usage and gender norms, and it's talking about Ukraine's national action plan for women, peace and security. Well, we don't see a lot of that in Ukraine at the moment, but have a look at the arrow at the bottom to get a feeling very quickly about what's going on here. A recent UN A recent UN Women Rapid Gender Analysis showed the crisis as largely as sorry, Mike, you'll have to help me there because I'm about to cough. Thank you. Pre-existing gender and intersectional equalities and discrimination with, quote, men subject to military conscription and women bearing the burden of childcare. Mike, what is the inference there? That this is wrong and we should get the women away from the children and on the front line?
It looks like it.
It looks like it, doesn't it? So here's a bit more of the proposal. I thought we'd put up the email address for the lady concerned if any of our viewers want to send her a polite email to ask more about what this charity is doing. But here's the consultant in Humanitarian, Lifeline Media for Ukraine. So this is part of a promotion on BBC Media Action's website. And if we have a look into this document, it gets pretty interesting because through this project, BBC Media Action aims to facilitate and develop a common understanding between media, humanitarian, local actors on what good communication in a humanitarian crisis looks like and strengthen the working relationships between these different stakeholders. So this is BBC Media Action beginning to take control of society, and what are they going to be teaching those local actors? Well, I think we know, but if you're not sure, if we go further on through the spec of this, you will see that one of the lines says that consultants should have a good understanding of behaviour change communication. So BBC Media Action has buried itself into Ukrainian media, and we are now going to see behavioural change techniques which have been used here in UK unleashed on an unsuspecting Ukrainian population. Personally, I think this is disgraceful. Alex, just a couple of words on where you see this going.
Well, I can see the Ukrainian media ending up even more like the British media. I remember that in the early stages of this, a reframed Georgian reporter, Natalia Antelava, was brought from BBC's Tbilisi operation to its Kiev operation in order to kickstart the process. So the BBC's branches are using Eastern Europeans against each other in this. You know, the end result of this is that self-respecting people with a lot of common sense in real life, who I know in Ukraine, call me up and say, we are tickled pink by the latest Ukrainian media report. One babushka paid to a whole Russian platoon by locking them in her woodshed and setting fire to them. They all burned alive. Tee-hee-hee, we are invincible. That's where this ends up, you know, with Uroboros loops of Ukrainian media generation. But that takes us, I think, on to, and finally, because we have had a packed news today, more will go into extra, but a few things on screen for people. I had to put this in for Debbie's sake. An American pharmacy has unfortunately lost the functionality of some of its neon lettering, and it's now calling itself a pharmacy unintentionally. Someone is having a go at Health Canada by suggesting that you get 10 maple leaf stamps on their loyalty card, and after 10 visits you can get free euthanasia. Staying with health, a cartoon in the Daily Telegraph. A patient on Ward 10 is seeing a consultant on the rounds. That doesn't happen very often anymore. And the consultant says, what you've got is incredibly rare. It's called a bed. One more on the health system. We know now that this was paid for by an advertiser, or done by an advertising agency paid for by taxpayers' money. This awful look him in the eyes. set up. And in this particular skit on that theme of 2020, 2021, the NHS is saying, look him in the eyes and tell him you're not taking the Kraken variant seriously. And of course, it's the cartoon Kraken who is staring back at you. And the hands, face, space motto has been turned into turn off your TV news, which I think is very accurate. What else do we have in the and finally?
That's it.
That's the end of it.
That's it, Alex. Yes. Okay.
Okay, Alex, thank you very much for that. Now, you've got some really excellent material which we're going to bring into extra time in a few minutes about the police and, tyranny in the police. So if you're able to join extra time as a paid up subscriber, then do join us for that. But I have to say that things are moving so quickly now with events in UK and overseas. It's very difficult to get all of the content into a news that we'd like to. We will do our best in the coming days, but it's coming in thick and fast. And it's apparent from the comments that we've seen in our chat box today that many of you are now picking up on the fact that there's something seriously wrong in UK. And we would say a key starting point is just to think that perhaps your government doesn't have your best interests at heart. In reality, we are being attacked by our own government. Just try that line of thought and see how many of the issues that you're puzzled about, you suddenly start to get an answer. On that thought, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for joining us, and sign in for extra time in a few moments. We'll say bye-bye.